Hello, everybody, and welcome to our inaugural February 2022 ACA Roundup. No, it's been a few months since we've done one, but really happy to have everyone with us here today. And without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. As always, just a quick recap of the general structure of these webinars. So we are doing them every month. We obviously skipped a few months during the full swing of open enrollment. But we are getting back into it, and we'll be doing these again every month for the rest of this year, going up to open enrollment. And during these webinars, we just like to cover important industry news that we want you all to be aware of, ONEO marketing news, and just other things that we think are important for all the agents to know. As always, we will be sending out the webinar slides after this webinar is done, and we'll be uploading a recording of this webinar in full to the O'Neill Marketing Agent Portal and to our YouTube page here in just a little bit as well. And again, similar to always, you can submit questions in the Q&A area right to the left side of your screen. You should see it. Typically, we don't answer questions live during these, just in the interest of time. But if you do submit the questions over there, we will be able to see them, and we'll send you answers via email after we're all done here. And before I really get going too, just a fair warning, since we've been gone for a little while and there's a bit more news that we wanted to cover, this webinar will go a bit longer than the typical 30 to 35 minutes that we aim for, probably be closer to 45, just so you all are aware. But if you do need to hop out, just remember, we'll be recording it, and we'll get you the slides as well if you need. So let's get started here with just some industry news. First, we really just wanted to kind of open up with just a little update about the open enrollment that kind of just ended, just with some numbers for you. So CMS has reported that about 21.3 million consumers signed up for a marketplace plan during the 2024 open enrollment that just ended. And if this isn't something that you're really keeping track of, that is about 5 million more consumers than the 2023 open enrollment. So a lot of growth over the last few months. In total, across all states, both FFM and state-based exchange, total enrollment went up 30%. New enrollments increased by 36%, and then even just renewals increased by 29% across the board for all marketplace plans. But since we work mostly in FFM states, and I know most of our agents do as well, I think it's important to point out as well that that growth was even more pronounced in the FFM states overall. So in FFM states only, total enrollment increased by 38%. New enrollment, this is crazy to me, increased by 45% from last year. Again, just in those FFM states. And then FFM renewals increased by 36% as well. So just wanted to open up with this just because I think it does bode really well. And it just shows that this is a really good time to be in the ACA industry and to be selling these kind of plans. There's a lot of need, and we see this growth to continue and to maintain. So it's a really good time to be selling ACA, especially in the federally facilitated marketplace states. And we also wanted to touch really quick, just right off the bat, too, on the updated affordability threshold for 2024. So for the new year, the IRS released that they have decreased that threshold that you use to calculate the affordability of employer-sponsored coverage for 2024. 2023, it was 9.13%. For the new year, it's down to 8.39% of household income. And just a quick reminder on what exactly that is. So technically, that's the percentage of the household income that the government considers to be, affordable to pay towards healthcare plans. For ACA agents, you're going to come in contact with this most frequently when you have clients who have the option to enroll in a health plan sponsored by their job. So if they do have the option of health insurance through their job, it has to be more expensive than that affordability threshold in order for them to get a subsidized ACA plan. So if you have someone, they're offered insurance through their job, that job insurance costs them, for 2024, let's say 9-10% of their household income. They can enroll in a subsidized ACA plan where if it's only 7%, then they're not able to get that subsidy, which typically means that they're going to want to enroll in that employer sponsored coverage. But then just another note too, we touched on this last year. This is related to the family glitch, but I think it's worth repeating too, that if the cost of the employer sponsored coverage is under the threshold for just the employee, but adding the family brings the cost over that affordability threshold, then it's good to know that the other members of the family can still apply for some subsidized ACA coverage. So the example that I like to give is, let's say we have a family, mom, dad, two kids. Mom works full time. Her job offers her a employer-sponsored plan that would cost about 7% of the household income for just mom alone. So that is considered affordable. But then when mom goes to add husband and two kids, that brings the cost up to a full 12% of the household income. So in this example, mom would not be able to get a subsidized ACA plan. She'd probably still want to take the employer sponsored coverage, but dad and both of those kids could go and apply for an ACA plan on the marketplace and get a subsidy. So it's important to know that this affordability threshold is really just tied to the employer or the employee only coverage, and there's a little bit more leniency with the rest of the family. And if you need some more information or you want some other examples, I've linked healthcare.gov's affordable coverage article here. Gives a little more background on it and gives some specific real world examples of where you'll see this play out. So it's good to know because that is a relatively significant decrease from last year. I want to get into a question I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds, and I know we've certainly had a lot of people ask us about it. And that's going to be the agent of record locks that a lot of carriers have implemented. So if you haven't seen anything about this yet, the brief overview is just since the CMS consent rule changes last year, a lot of carriers have started to implement these agent of record locks. And they're doing this in an effort to discourage policy theft and mid-year AOR switches that I'm sure you all have experienced before and is frankly a big issue in the industry right now. So before I really dive into some carrier specific policies, I will just say this is a developing issue. So take a lot of this with a grain of salt. This is something that we're still learning more about each day. And we're still, of course, learning more about not only the policies that these carriers have in place, but how the policies are actually being implemented, which, again, as I'm sure a lot of you already know, is sometimes different from what it would be on paper. But without any further ado, I wanted to jump into some of the carriers' AOR lock policies that they have shared with us or they have released to all agents. So first up, it's going to be Aetna. This one is pretty standard for all the other agent of record locks that carriers are implementing. So for Aetna's policy for 1/1 effective policies, the broker on file as of December 31st, pretty much at the time of effectuation, was locked in as the agent of record for the entire plan year. And then it said two for 2/1 effective dates going forward, so February and anything during SEP. The broker that is on the first enrollment submitted will be locked in as the agent of record for that plan. So pretty much for 1/1, if you were the agent upon effectuation, they've said that they've locked that in. For everything else, if you are the first agent submitting that policy to Aetna, then they should have you locked in as the agent of record. And then when it comes to changing agent of records mid-year, Aetna has what we are calling a soft lock. You see that's in quotations. Soft lock, you'll see me use the term soft lock and hard lock. I should clarify, those are our terms that we use. This is not a term that the carriers use, but I think it helps explain it. So Aetna has only what we consider a soft lock, which essentially means that any change that affects the policy number, and that would be something like a plan change within Aetna or something that results in a benefit change, can result in a new agent of record. So just keep that in mind. A plan change or a benefit change results in the new agent of record for what they've said. And with a lot of these, we have some more information about them. So I've linked here Aetna's email announcement that they sent out to agents if you want to see their words about it and if you didn't receive that email. Next up, talk a little bit about Ambetter's agent of record lock policy. You'll notice very similar to Aetna's. So for 1/1 effective policies, they've said the broker that was on file as of December 31st, I would say December 31st / January 1st, when the policy effectuated, was locked in as the agent of record for the plan year. And then similar to Aetna, they've said for 2/1 effective dates onward, the broker that's on the first enrollment will be locked as the AOR for the plan. And then when it comes to switching AORs, Ambetter has, again, what we would call a hard lock for those AOR switches. And what that means is that changing just the plans or the benefits within Ambetter, like we said with Aetna, will actually not result in an AOR change for Ambetter. They have said that essentially once a client has been inactive with Ambetter for 30 days, at that point they could switch back into an Ambetter plan with a new agent of record. But from what they've said, it would take that 30 days of inactivity for the AOR to go back to its fluid state where someone else could step in and become the new agent of record. So if it's just a policy change within Ambetter, or even simpler, just the agent went in and took a few dollars off the income and put their MPN on it, for what Ambetter said, that would not cause an agent of record change in their eyes. It would take the client leaving Ambetter for at least 30 days and then returning with a new agent of record. And as with that note, we've got Ambetter's email announcement linked right here as well, in case you want to read over it. Cigna as well. Cigna is a little bit different. You'll notice some slight changes, but overall, again, pretty similar to all the other ones we'll be talking about today. Cigna, their big difference is they've stated that all policies will be locked to the first agent submitting that policy. So whereas Ambetter and Aetna said, January 1st will be done upon effectuation, Cigna has stated that all the policies will be locked to the first agent who submits that policy to them. But that being said, this is kind of where I think the grain of salt should be applied. We'd still recommend that you verify that you are the agent of record upon effectuation. Honestly, with any of these carriers, because there has been a little bit of a mismatch or some confusion, or at least there have been some cases where we've seen that perhaps this was not implemented fully, or at least to the way that they've said it would be. So even though we do have a lot of these policies here we'll be talking about, it's always still recommended that you just check, make sure you're the agent of record, both on Health Sherpa and on the carrier portals, because again, better safe than sorry. As for policy changes, Cigna, like Ambetter, has that hard lock for agent of records. The big difference with them is they have said the only way to do it would be 90 instead of 30 days of inactivity, at which point they could switch back into a Cigna plan with a new agent of record. For 90 days of inactivity, the original agent of record will still remain on that plan. One thing to note, though, for Cigna, this is kind of unique, is they do have what they're calling an IFP broker designation form that you can complete if you sold plans, but you are not designated as the agent of record. If you ever find yourself in this situation and you need a copy of the form, we did download one and save it in the O'Neill Marketing Agent portal. So just go to the Agent Resources section and then to the public folder, carrier information, and then right in Cigna's carrier information folder, you'll find that file named IFP Broker Designation Form fillable. You can go ahead and fill that out and submit it with Cigna. It's not something that we have a ton of experience yet. As I said, a lot of this is kind of still in flux, but that is something that they have mentioned to us, so we wanted to make it available to you all should you need to use it. Then on to Ascension. They're the last big carrier that's really publicly announced anything about the agent of record locks. For what they've said is for 1/1 effective policy, the broker that was on file upon effectuation was locked for the plan year. And then similar to the other ones, for 2/1 dates forward, the broker on the first active enrollment will be locked as the agent of record for the plan. Ascension, they have not released any information about mid-year AOR changes, so that is, again, still kind of in flux. But as with the other ones, if you want to read their email announcement, we have linked it here for you. Then I just have kind of a few closing remarks about the agent of record locks and kind of what's going on there. The big overall point right there at the top is that this really is still a developing area. So there will almost certainly be more changes and updates that will come out over the course of this year. And as we said earlier, it really is always best to confirm that you are still the agent of record upon policy effectuation, because we have seen a little bit of discrepancy sometimes in their stated policy versus the implementation. We all know that these carriers, especially the major ones, they're dealing with hundreds of thousands of agents and policies, and this is a relatively new thing that kind of had to get developed almost on the fly, frankly, while open enrollment was happening. So want to give them a little bit of grace, but it is still something that I think that agents should still be on top of. Hopefully, as we go along, these will get more developed. And I truly think it will be something that is a huge benefit to agents selling ACA, since I'm sure a lot of you all have experienced the downsides of not having the agent of record locked in. But that being said, we would still recommend that you kind of remain vigilant about this and continue to check up on your policies, even though there is AOR locks for some of these carriers. And I would say too, if you're showing as the agent of record on Health Sherpa or healthcare.gov, but the policy is not showing up in your carrier portal, always recommend that you contact the carrier to have that fixed. It could simply just be a glitch, or it could mean that another agent is listed as the agent or broker of record in the carrier system instead of you. So it's always worth checking up on when you notice anything like that. And then again, when in doubt, it's always good to just contact the carriers directly. They are the arbiters of their own internal policies and how they're going about this. So they're going to be the bastions of knowledge that you'll want to go to if there's ever any gray area there. Also, want to mention too, some carriers may have implemented these AOR lock policies internally, but not released the information to agents. So just even though these carriers are the ones that have been a little bit more public about it, there frankly still might be some other carriers who are doing this internally and maybe just aren't releasing the information out to agents publicly. And as always, it's not uncommon for carriers to make mistakes, misassign policies, and a lot of times the only way that you can know about this and get it resolved is to contact the carriers directly, since a lot of this won't be very apparent if you're just looking at it from the outside. But with all that said, again, my closing remarks on this are just stay tuned. Hopefully, by the time the next open enrollment comes around, we'll have a much better idea of how the carriers are going about this and what the ramifications are for agents. Then I also wanted to touch on some updates about Health Sherpa's consent platform and what they are doing for agents regarding the consent that you need to get. Some of you all might already know about this since Health Sherpa started doing this around about a month ago, but since this is our first roundup of the year, I did want to mention it because I think it's important. And that is that Health Sherpa has added an option to email digital consent forms directly to your clients from within the Health Sherpa workflow. So when you select this option, it'll allow you to send an email directly to your client from Health Sherpa with a link to their digital consent form. And then once the client signs and submits that form, a PDF version of it will be saved in your consent records table right in your Health Sherpa profile. And then a nice touch too is if your client doesn't have an email associated with their app, or if perhaps they have a different email that they would prefer you to send that document to, you can actually input a separate email that will be used only for consent collection. I know that's something that comes up every now and then, so Health Sherpa was gracious enough to build that into their consent platform as well. And I want to note too, I'm going to show you some examples of this on the next slide. But before I do that, I just did want to note still that you can still opt to collect consent records on your own and then just upload them to Health Sherpa directly. It's important to know that you are required to gather consent from your clients, and you are required to maintain your records for 10 years by CMS. You still always have to do that. But that being said, you are not required to upload the documentation to Health Sherpa. Even though this is a useful feature, if you have a good system on your own side that's working well for you, just know you don't have to do this, but I know a lot of people would prefer this. So if this is something you think would benefit you, I'd encourage you to look into it and perhaps start to do that. It's an easy way, just right in the workflow, that you can know that you get the consent and you can store it, and that consent documentation will be there if you ever need it. And just for an example, this is what it will look like on the agent side. So when you go to the consent, you'll see that option right up top is the new addition. So instead of uploading the consent to Health Sherpa or saying that you have it on your own, you can email that digital consent form to your client. So when you click that, you'll have the option to have that sent out to whatever email they want it to go to. And then on the client side, this is an example of the emails that they will be seeing if you send this to them. So they'll just click in to grant the consent, and then it's a pretty straightforward, simple, just signing their signature there and submitting it. That'll get back to you. You'll have a record. They'll have that record, and that will probably make it flow a little bit easier, especially if you did not already have something to this magnitude set up on your own systems. So again, just wanted to point it out. I'm sure a lot of you all were already familiar with this, but if you weren't, This is, I think, something that is very beneficial to all agents. And if this is something that you need, would highly recommend that you check it out and look into it on Health Sherpa. All right, and let's move on now to just some O'Neill marketing news. Going to start pretty much as always with just some updates from our contracting team. So the first and foremost, wanted to let everyone know that UHC and Molina transfer blackouts have ended. Those ended on February the 1st. So if you requested transfers during UHC or Molina's blackout periods, then you should have already received an email from contracting at o'neillmarketing.net with information on getting that transfer process started. As always, if you can't find your email, I would always recommend, of course, searching for that email in your inbox or checking your spam perhaps. But if you can't find it, as always, just go ahead and reach out to our contracting team. They can work with you to get those transfers started. Other thing I wanted to mention as well, Aetna and Cigna are fully open for contracting, both new appointments and transfers. So those four carriers, go ahead and get all that started if you need to. And if you've already requested it, make sure you can find that email so that we'll be getting those transfers started for you. And then I just wanted to give some contracting updates looking forward since there weren't a lot of current updates. Since again, we've been getting a lot of questions. Ambetter is still in a transfer blackout period right now. This is set to end in April. We should have a specific date a little bit closer to then, but just know if you need to transfer your Ambetter appointment over, you'll need to wait until either April 1st or April 15th usually. Of course, as that date gets closer, we will let you know exactly when that is, and we will let everybody know if you've already requested that transfer. And then Oscar as well, that's another carrier. They are still currently in a blackout period. What they've said is that this is set to end in August. But that being said, we think it is possible that this August date will get moved up, even though there's been no official announcement from Oscar yet. So stay tuned. Of course, we will notify agents if and when that changes. But just know right now, Oscar is still in a blackout period, and it is at the very least a few months until they are planning to open that back up for transfers. And then my overall point, just on the contracting updates, kind of as always, frankly, is if you know you want to transfer appointments to O'Neill Marketing, definitely go ahead and submit your requests now. Even if the carrier is in a blackout period, we will let you know when they reopen and we can start your transfer at that point. And that way it won't forget. I know what happens a lot of time is people will wait until the blackout period's over. They're not staying on top of it. They might miss out initially right there, and then maybe a month or two goes by before they really start that process. And especially for some of these carriers that don't open up later into the year, we think it's always really, really important to be proactive about it. It kills me every year when I see people who start transfers too late, and then just when open enrollment starts, they get kind of stuck in that limbo of not being transferred or not being appointed. So as always with contracting, it is always beneficial to be as proactive as you can when requesting new contracts, transfers, or anything like that. Because just remember, as the closer and closer we get to open enrollment, the longer the contracting process takes as these carriers get busier and busier. I know it's only February, March is next week, but it will sneak up on you. So be proactive about it. If you need anything, go ahead and request it now. Worst case scenario, it's on hold, and our contracting team will notify you when that opens back up. Then I also wanted to touch on 1099s for agents. I know we've gotten a lot of questions about this as well. So I did want to tell everybody that the 2023 1099 forms had been completed, and they were sent out to agents in late January, early February. Uh, Timing might be a little different for each agent, but by late January, early February, they were all completed and sent out. We sent them out via email, and then we also mailed them in the postal service to the address you had listed on your W-9. So if you're checking for your email 1099, look for an email that'll come from QuickBooks, and it'll have the subject line, "Your tax forms are ready." Then you'll have to, of course, log in and download it from there, but should have sent out an email to everybody, and frankly, that'll probably get to you a bit quicker than the United States Postal Service will. But then if the address on your on your W-9 is incorrect, again, please let us know and submit an updated W-9 to O'Neill Marketing so that we can correct that for your 2024 1099. So again, if you haven't gotten that in the mail, check your W-9. Whatever address you have listed on that W-9 is where that will be sent to. So just go ahead and check on that. Definitely don't wait until the first week of April to start thinking about that. But aside from that, if you haven't received your 1099 yet, or you have questions about getting it to you or any of the contents of the 1099, certainly as well, don't hesitate to reach out to support@o'neillmarketing.net. We're always happy to take a look at anything you need or figure out a way to get you that 1099. So keep an eye out for that. And if you haven't already got them, maybe check the address, check your email for QuickBooks. And if you can't find it either way, just reach out to our support team and we can help you out there. And so for the last part of our roundup this month, I wanted to address a lot of very common questions we've been getting about commissions. As I'm sure you're all aware, it is that time of the year. January commissions have started to come in over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And of course, they will continue to really pour in over the next month or two as well. But we've been getting a lot of questions about the commissions. So wanted to just take this time to address the most common questions or concerns that have gotten raised to our support team, just to put them all down so that you guys can be aware. And obviously, the first question that we've been getting a lot of is when to expect your commission payments. So we'll start kind of at the top level and slowly get more granular with each of these slides as we go forward. But if you're looking for when the commissions are going to get paid out, typical rule of thumb is going to be that they are going to be start getting paid at least the month following the policy effectuation date, with open enrollment being the biggest caveat there. But typically, it's going to be the month following the policy effectuation. So, for example, you write a policy mid-April with a 5/1 effective date. That policy, we wouldn't expect it to get paid out until sometime during June. And then within the month of June, of course, the timing will vary by carriers. Some carriers typically pay commissions by the 5th or the 10th. Others, frankly, I would say most carriers, it's more like the 15th to the 25th, I would say. But just know it does vary by carrier, but the rule of thumb is that it'll be paid out the month following policy effectuation. But as I said, big caveat is open enrollment commissions. Some are paid early, a lot are paid late. So really the first month commissions for 1/1 and 2/1 policies are where issues and delays are the most common, coming from the carriers as well. So just know if things seem like they're taking a little longer for your January and February commissions, that is kind of expected. Unfortunately, carriers, you got to remember, are processing the commissions for all the hundreds of thousands of policies that were written under them during open enrollment and looking to pay them out. So it is a really busy time for their commissions team. So a lot of times, if we see missing commissions or other issues like that, the response they will have is just to give them times. And a lot of times they will go back through on a following statement and sweep up any mistakes or back paid commissions that were left out of the last commission statement. So just something to be aware of, especially during January, February, and March. Typically, by the time April commissions come around, or rather March commissions getting paid out in April, around then everything tends to stabilize and everything becomes a little bit more regular. But until then, the carriers do really ask that we, again, give them a little bit of grace and understand that they're typically trying to do the best they can. And then on O'Neill Marketing side, the way that we process commissions is we do it on a weekly basis. So we let the commissions come in and we close that up typically Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday night. And then we start processing commissions on Thursday and Friday. So barring any issues, commissions should all be processed and we'll start transferring them out to agents on Friday. And then depending on the timing, of course, there are sometimes occasions where we'll send it out, but then the banks won't be able to transfer it through to agents on Monday, or if you have a bank that's open on Saturday, maybe they'll transfer it through on Saturday. So obviously, grain of salt, there is a little bit of leeway there with bank transfer speeds and all of that, but that is typically our schedule for commission. So each statement you'll see in your portal is going to cover the commissions paid by carriers the preceding Wednesday to Wednesday. So just keep that in mind. We collect commissions essentially Thursday until Wednesday afternoon, process them on Thursday and Friday, and then look to pay them out on Friday. Just wanted to touch on that before we move into the other most common question, which is going to be about missing commissions. I know this is a hot topic for a lot of people. Of course, it is always something that we want to be aware of and check on, certainly, to make sure that we're getting paid for all our hard work. But if you are missing commissions, we really do think there are some very, very common causes for missing commissions that you should always be checking out first. And we really say this because we've seen if you send just a list of missing commissions to carriers without doing any due diligence on your part or checking for these very common issues, you may not get a full response. From our discussions with carriers, they really are putting a lot of work to making these answers available to agents. So if you send them a list of 50 policies and they get 5 in and realize that all this information is already available for you, we've seen it happen where they frankly just might not give you the full response. It's a huge burden on their part. So it is, in our opinion, really important that you are checking on all of these issues first on your end, because a lot of this is truly available to you. And then before I dive into those specific issues, I do want to say as well that all of the things described in the following slides are available in our missing commissions article. I have it linked right here. You can also find it on o'neillmarketing.net if you just search missing commissions. There is a link there, and it goes through all of these with a little bit more detail. And then again, before I jump in, the one thing I will note as well is that the instructions are slightly different if you use an O'Neill Marketing NPN override. So if that is the case and you wrote the policies under one of O'Neill Marketing's NPN, there are slightly different instructions for that situation. You can find them at the bottom of that missing commissions article. I think this is a really great resource that we're going to continue to build on. So if you're ever looking for that and you want kind of just a checklist of things to go through with your policies, highly recommend that you take a look at that missing commissions article. So again, this is the things that we think that everyone should check when it comes to missing commissions. And similar to the other stuff, we're going to start very high up, high levels, and then move more granularly as we get closer to it. So the first thing certainly is if you never received a commission payment from O'Neill Marketing, it's always a good idea to go ahead and just check the bank account information you have on file with us. You can check that right in your O'Neill Marketing agent portal in the agent information tab. We always ask to check it because every once in a while we will see someone hasn't been receiving commissions, and it turns out that the bank information on their direct deposit agreement was not 100% correct, or maybe it's outdated and you haven't updated it. It's an issue we see a lot, so it's always something that I think is worth checking. Typically, though, if you've been receiving payments from O'Neill Marketing in the past to the correct bank account, then just know this probably is not going to be the case. If you're already getting paid correctly on recent statements, then it's probably not going to be that. But we do think this is important to check, because if it's simply just a bank account issue, fortunately, that is a pretty easy thing to fix. We have instructions right on the slide for if you need to update that, which again, you can do right in your agent portal. And then if you have any issues with past payments being sent to inactive bank accounts or any bank account issues like that, just go ahead and email commissions@o'neillmarketing.net so that they can look into that and get it solved for you. And then the next common issue, I got to say, this seems like it would be very self-evident, but I cannot understate really how many commission inquiries often do come down, frankly, just to this. And so it's important to ask, has this commission already been paid? Have I already been paid on this policy? Again, seems straightforward, but we get questions like them every week where the answer just ends up being you got paid and you just didn't see it. So really the action item for this is when you're checking commission statements, be sure to look at multiple commission statements. Don't just pull the most recent commission statement and check that unless you have a running list that you're already working off of. Because again, like we mentioned a few slides ago, we pay out everything on a week-to-week basis. So if you just pull that top commission statement from your portal, you're really only looking for commissions from about a week or a week and a half ago. So it's important that you pull multiple. You can click as many statements as you want in the portal, and you can download them all on one spreadsheet. So it's very easy to look through. I personally recommend that you pull at least 4 commission periods. That'll be 4 weeks, about a month of time. If not more, I recommend at least 4 weeks. But frankly, whenever I am looking into commission stuff, what I do is I pull months at a time. I will go all the way back to October, sometimes even September, depending on the situation, because I'll pull it all and then I have one file of everything that's been paid out over the last 5 to 6 months, and you can filter it within there. So then you can know for certain that you're not leaving out a commission that was paid really early or really late or any of those peculiarities. It happens a lot of times, so it's important that you're looking at a wider point of view. And again, if you need to an overview on how to run commission statements on the agent portal, I have put a tutorial video right in the slide here that I'd recommend that you check out. And the general gist for all this, the reason for it is that it's important to keep in mind that carriers can pay commissions sometimes weeks or even months early or late. So the big example I see is, a carrier will pay January commissions as earlier as November or December. It is relatively uncommon, but usually what'll happen is you'll enroll a client who either is in a $0 policy, or, let's say you enroll a client early November, first day of open enrollment. By November 5th, they've paid their premium and their policy is good to go. Depending on the carrier, they might go ahead and pay out that commission in the November or December statement. And so what'll happen though is I see this a lot specifically with UHC. If you're looking at your statements and you're only looking for the things that have been paid out in February or January, you might actually be missing some statements from a while ago that were just paid out early. So it might actually look like you do have a missing commission. So overall, I would say pull larger commission files and then filter from that so that you know that you're not missing any data or any commissions that have already been paid. On all our commission reports, there is a column for what's called the coverage month, and that's essentially the month that the commission is being paid for. So again, if you're looking for January commissions, pull, I would say, all the way back until December, November, as long as you want to go back, and then just filter that coverage months column so that it just says January or February 2024. And that way, you know that you're not missing anything. And the next up, this is something that we've been seeing more and more of, especially around open enrollment time, is it's important to verify that your appointments were completed and confirmed when you wrote the policy. As a general rule of thumb, again, you should always wait until your appointments are listed as completed and confirmed, or until you've received confirmation directly from the carrier with your writing number or your official welcome number, or I'm sorry, your official welcome letter, before you start writing business with that carrier under your NPN. If you use the NPN of an agency principal or someone else in your agency, do the same thing. Just verify that their NPN was appointed at the time of writing. And the reason why that's so important is that many carriers will not pay commissions unless you're appointed at the time of submission. Again, these policies vary pretty heavily from carrier to carrier. Some have a little bit of a grace period, but most of them have none at all. So for instance, if you write a policy this week and your appointment is not completed until the following week, for some carriers, they will tell you that you are not the agent, you are not commissionable for that policy since you were not appointed at the time of submission. So it's always important to check your appointments and to just make sure that you were appointed at the time. Again, this is maybe something that's a little bit harder to check after the fact, but it is important to keep in mind while you are going through the contracting process. And if you're checking missing commissions, again, I think it's always worth it to just verify that you are appointed with the carrier. And again, you can check all of this right on your O'Neill Marketing Agent portal. Just go to the My Appointments tab and you'll be able to see everything there. One note I will say, if you use an O'Neill Marketing NPN, go ahead and check our NPN override list just to make sure you use the correct NPN, because there are cases with O'Neill NPNs where only one of them is appointed with a carrier. So it is important to follow that list when you can. The next up is, again, seems pretty straightforward, but it pops up all the time. You need to check to make sure that the policy is still active. Probably the easiest way to check this is just right on Health Sherpa. Go into your dashboard, search up the client by their name, and then click into their policy page. And then on the policy page, just make sure that the policy is listed as active in the policy status section. And I recommend that you do this on Health Sherpa instead of just looking at a Health Sherpa export, just so that you can be positive that you have the most accurate and up-to-date information about the policy. We've discussed it pretty in depth in past roundups, so I won't get too deep into it, but it's just always important to remember that that Health Sherpa export is not necessarily real-time data. It does have to get synced and uploaded, and that depends on a lot of stuff internal to the Health Sherpa platform that I'm not going to get into right now. But it is important to know that that might not be the most active or the most up-to-date data. So it's important to double check everything on the HealthSherpa platform if you are unsure. You can also check this in the carrier portal. You can go in and make sure that the policy is listed as active. If it's showing in your portal and the policy is active, that's a pretty good indication that it is active. But HealthSherpa is still a really good resource because it is patched into the marketplace, and a lot of times they'll have the most accurate and up-to-date information about the policy at large. And then, of course, pretty self-evident, but if a policy is listed as canceled or terminated, it will not be commissionable from the carrier, unfortunately. Right. The next, this is again very common. We've been seeing it more recently. Hopefully, this will decrease over the year as carriers become more hands-on in locking in agent of records. But we still think it's always important that you verify your agent of record status. The best way to do this is typically going to be through Health Sherpa. I will get into the caveats in a second, but Health Sherpa, again, even for the agent of record, is not a bad place to start when you're looking into it. So, similar with the other ones, go in, find the client's page, and check to see if you are still listed as the agent of record, or if it's now a different agent, or if it's listed as other party. If you need, you can also find that information on healthcare.gov, and I've linked an article right there explaining how to do so. I do want to point out, though, with this caveat, we have seen some rare cases where essentially the agent of record on Health Sherpa will not match the agent of record you'll see on the carrier portal. We've noticed this in particular with some carriers. It doesn't seem to be extremely widespread, but it is something that we have seen a few times, so I want to point it out. Health Sherpa has said that it's essentially an issue with data not flowing correctly from the carrier back to Health Sherpa about updated agent of records. Regardless, we think this is something that they will get sorted out here shortly. But just know if you do find yourself in one of those rare cases where Health Sherpa is showing something, but the agent of record on your carrier portal still says that it is you. Just remember that commissions are still always paid by the carrier. So the agent of record in their system is at the end of the day going to determine how those commissions are paid out. And if you're ever unsure, again, always a good idea to just reach out to the carrier and confirm it'll only cost you an email, and they'll be able to at least provide a little bit of certainty to the case. And then if you do find yourself in a situation where another agent has made themselves the agent of record for the policy after it's been effectuated, still always recommend check your carrier portal, see if you're still listed as the AOR there, and just remember that's going to be what matters the most at the end of the day. Since most of the carriers have implemented the agent of record locks in order to discourage this kind of policy flip-flopping, it is possible the carrier will still have you locked in as the AOR, even if another agent has tried to come in and change it. As we said earlier, this will vary pretty heavily by carrier, and frankly, even within one carrier, it's still good to double check because this is all pretty brand new. And then the last thing I'll say about this is, of course, I'm sure you already know, if a policy was stolen and you can confirm with the client that they didn't authorize any of the changes, or if another agent has come in and canceled, wrote a new policy, anything like that, which unfortunately we see a lot of, best thing you can do is contact the marketplace with the client to undo those changes that they made, and then go ahead and frankly just report the agent. We've been seeing a lot of agents coming in and canceling policies, doing a new policy with another carrier, doing stuff like that. So it's just important to remain vigilant about that. And again, if you see anything wrong like that, go ahead and contact the marketplace. They can fix everything for you, and then it'll be coming from them. And the next thing, very common issue as well, just go ahead. It's always a good idea to just look for the policy in your carrier portal. Make sure that it's there, you are the agent of record, and that all the information of the plan is still correct and updated in there. Sometimes if a client has an active policy that's not present in your carrier portal, that may mean that there's an issue on the carrier side that's affecting your commissions, and that'll need to be resolved. Sometimes it can be simply just a glitch where the broker of record didn't make it through. It's not on your portal. Sometimes it really is just a little bug where they have the policy, they know that you're the agent, and it's just not showing up. But it can also mean, though, that another agent came in and took it, and you're not seeing it there because you're no longer the agent of record for the carrier. So it's always good just to look in and make sure that the policy is even there. And if you don't see it there, go ahead and contact the carrier directly. But I will say, if you're at that point, make sure that you've already verified that you are active and that you are the agent of record. Because again, if you're missing a policy in your portal, but it turns out that that policy is just canceled or you're not the agent of record, the carriers will typically want you to at least do that bare minimum before you go ahead and check. So again, usually I would say to follow the steps in these orders, but if you just notice a policy missing in your carrier portal, just remember, always a good idea, check to make sure it's still active and that you are still the agent of record. And if both of those are checked out, go ahead and reach out to the carrier as soon as possible to let them know that you're missing that policy so that they can look into it for you. Right. And then the last thing that I always say, it's very important to check. And I think this is frankly something that is not checked enough. It's important to check to make sure that your client doesn't have any unpaid premiums or that they're not in a grace period. Because if they have missed a premium payment or they're in a grace period for their premiums, that'll typically delay your commissions until all the premiums are paid in full. So this is important to note that this information is not available on Health Sherpa for most carriers. It seems like Health Sherpa is looking to build this out a little more and add some of this payment information. So very well might change in the coming months. But as of right now, most carriers don't have this kind of detailed payment information available directly on Health Sherpa. So the best place to check for it is, again, going to be right in your carrier portals. Most carrier portals have this information in some way, shape, or form. Just look for either they'll call it the paid through date or the delinquency status or the financial status. Just note specific terms will vary, but most carriers will have that. And then in that missing commission article I mentioned earlier, and I've also linked them right here, we do have instructions on how you can check this in the 6 primary ACA carrier portals, and I'm sure we'll be adding more soon. So just know this is available if you know where to look. And remember, just paid through date, delinquency status, financial status, even policy status sometime is just important to look for to make sure that they're paid up on the premiums. And then just know if they are in a grace period or they've missed a past premium payment, that is likely going to be the reason for the delayed premium or the delayed commission, rather. And the commissions typically won't be paid up until the premiums are all paid, of course. And then that kind of brings us to the end of the common commission issues that you should check. But now we kind of get to the point where the question is, what do I do if I've checked all those 7 things and none of that seems to be the issue? Again, I will say before I get into this, in my personal experience, when we're going through commissions, it tends to be one of those 7 things. I couldn't say an exact number, but again, in my personal experience, far more than half of missing commissions tend to boil down to one of those issues in some way, shape, or form. But that being said, if you've done all your due diligence and everything is looking good and it's none of the issues in any of those previous slides, again, the best thing to do is to reach out to the carriers directly. We do recommend that you email the commission or broker support emails. You can find those in the carrier resources tab if you don't have them. Recommend you send them an email with the list of your missing policies and go ahead and CC support at Onio Marketing so that we can be there as well. Again, if you're going to email, just make sure that you've checked everything first so that the carrier can know that you have done your part and they can dig into their back end. One thing to note, though, is particularly for agency admins or non-writing agents, if you are looking into the commissions for another agent, make sure that the agent of record is included in the email. Because sometimes you'll go to the carrier, if you're an agency admin, asking about one of your agents that you work with, but you got to see it from the carrier side. They don't know who you are. So usually if you just have the actual agent of record CC'd on that email, that should at the very least show to them that you are working with them. And then again, just make sure that you have checked all those common issues. Carriers might not investigate your entire list of policies. If they're going down and you send them 50 and within the first 5 they see, this one's canceled, this one's not active, you're not the agent of record for this one hasn't paid their premium, they're gonna a lot of times send it back to you and ask you to look this over on the agent portal, because again, they've got a lot going on and they really do a lot to make these resources available to agents. But then if you get through all that, sometimes we do find ourselves in situations where the carrier is not able to really help. And if that is the case, please let us know, and then we can take that up and we will see if we can get any additional information from the carrier. So again, if you've done all that, and the carriers still aren't able to help you, please go ahead and send in Health Sherpa export of the missing policies and then any additional information you can to support at O'Neill Marketing and commissions at o'neillmarketing.net. And I'll say too, if you've reached out to the carriers and they have provided you any responses, please also send that to us as well. There are times where the carriers will simply just not release the information to you. Usually CCing support at o'neillmarketing.net on that email will solve that problem, but there are times where, frankly, the carriers just need the question to come from O'Neill Marketing. So if that's the case, if you can just send us your questions, how you relate them, we can relay them right back to the carrier and hopefully get you a little bit of better of an answer there. And then just before we close here today, I did just kind of want to wrap it all up with just some closing thoughts about commissions as we're heading out of open enrollment and we're in that period of the year that really is just about making sure everything's getting paid out. And first and foremost is that the best way to avoid missing commissions altogether is just to effectively manage your book of business. Obviously, there are times where the mistake is going to be on the carrier side. Some things are out of your hands. So obviously, it's very hard to find yourself in a position where you never have a missing commission. But a lot of missing commission issues could be mitigated or at least dealt with earlier and maybe even before the commission goes missing if you just really keep an eye on your book of business. So everything we mentioned in the past slides is good to check on consistently throughout the year instead of just when you notice that commissions are missing. Because if you're only being reactive by the time you notice those missing commissions, it might be too late, especially if you're, looking at commissions from 6, 10 months ago. The time might have passed. So it's really important that you're keeping an eye on your book of business throughout the year, checking that your policies are active, all of that good stuff. And don't just think about that when you notice that your commission statements are going down. And then also too, I think it's really important to familiarize yourself with the carrier portals and the resources. Most of the time, you can find all the answers you need right there in the carrier portal if you know where to look. And as I mentioned earlier, the carriers really do put a lot of time and effort into making sure these portals are useful for agent and have a lot of these resources. So if you've never logged into the carrier portals, please go and do that and familiarize yourself with it and know. So if you're missing commissions from Cigna or Aetna or Oscar, at least you will know how to get in and verify the basic stuff on the portal. Because truly, just trust me, if you know the carrier portals, it is pretty easy to find most of this information. And then again, don't hesitate to reach out to carriers. They are always the ones who can contain the final answer for it. Sometimes there are mistakes that are imperceptible unless you contact the carrier directly. And just remember, carriers make mistakes, but as long as you're contacting them and they can point out that mistake, they should be able to get it fixed and retroactively pay everything out. And then the last thing I would say is, just before we end it today, I know a lot of this missing commission stuff might seem like a bit overwhelming and it might seem like a lot of steps to go through. But if you get familiar with it and you do it a few times, it really does become a lot easier. And additionally, too, you can kind of just chunk it out into various carriers and look at multiple things at a time. Most of the portals have ways that you can get exports so that you don't all have to do it on the website. You can do it through spreadsheets. There are a lot of ways to make it a lot easier for you, especially just by doing it in bulks at a time. But again, make sure you're managing the book of business throughout the year and keeping an eye on all this stuff. And we do think that that will make things flow a lot smoother and make sure that you have a lot less missing commissions. And so that is going to bring us to the end of our presentation today. As always, we really appreciate you all coming out today, sticking with us for a good bit longer than we usually go for. After this month, we'll get back into more of the normal swing of ACA roundups. But as always, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to our agent support team via the phone or the email address on the screen. We are always happy to help however we can. So if you need anything or have any questions, go ahead and reach out to us and we'll be able to help you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day and take care.
The webinar has ended. Thank you for joining. Goodbye.